Yeah.
Okay. Let's start from here. V'zeu she'aya Yosef. Here. Right?
Yeah.
וזהו שהיה יוסף מנחש באותו גביע כסף, שהיה כלי לאור עתיק יומי. So, what Yosef did is he turned the silver goblet, which is meditating on Hashem's goodness, into a vessel for the light of Atik Yomi, for the higher light, right? Remember I told you that the top doesn't go in. So this part doesn't have a vessel. Because it doesn't have a vessel, there's no way to see it. So he made that silver goblet into a vessel. Now he's telling us what Isbonenus is actually doing. It's making a vessel for the Chochmah, Bina, and Das of Atik, for the Moichin of Atik. That's called the Reisha De'ayin, the unknowable head, the head of nothingness. It's called in Kabbalah. ואמר, כי נחש ינחש בו, פירוש הערים בו כל הרמומיות את נחש העליון. He says, and I will
Raise up.
No, I will guess. Okay? I surely will guess. And the guessing here is from the same word as nachash, as a serpent, as a snake. So he's able, because of this, to fool, to be more cunning than all the cunningness of the supernal snake. Who's the supernal snake? That's the snake. That's the snake about whom it says, and the snake was cunning. It was more cunning than any beast of the field. And that has a name in the Tanakh, and Isaiah calls it Atanin Gadol, Mitzrayim. Not just Isaiah, Ezekiel, they all call him Atanin Gadol HaRovetz Al Yehorav. The great crocodile, but Tanin here, Tanin is that's the modern interpretation of Tanin. Tanin was actually some kind of big snake, some kind of big lizard. Shehu klipat Mitzrayim bazman hazeh. And that is the klipa, the impure husk of Egypt in our times even. Shehu b'chinat reisha de dahava. And it is what's called in Kabbalah, in Daniel, later in Kabbalah, the head of gold. Because when Daniel saw his vision, he saw that there was a beast. It was as a man, and its head was made out of gold. The feet were made out of clay. And it's accepted that that vision was a vision of all the exiles that we would be through, all the impure husks of the world. And the head, the highest one, was Egypt. And it was likened to a head of gold. And the Arba Guluyot and the other four exiles, Edom, Madai, Yavan, and Ashur, or Bavel, it depends on how you count them. Usually Madai is said as Paras, it's Persian instead of Media. It doesn't matter, they all have different names. Hem Guf V'Raglayim, they're the body and the feet of this tremendous statue that he saw in his vision. The feet were considered to be the final exile, the exile that we're in right now. So the exile there it's made out of clay. The feet were made out of clay to indicate that the whole thing is sitting on something very, very weak. And so eventually when the clay falls apart, when the Roman Empire falls apart, that's the beginning of the end of all the exiles. The Galut Mitzrayim and Onim Naime, but we usually only count 4 exiles. In Egypt, it's not considered an exile. Why? Because it's the crown. The crown you can't see. The crown is always above the consciousness. So when you count it, it's the same way that you have 4 letters in God's name, and the 5th letter is not there. Where's the 5th letter? The 5th letter, we say it's the tip of the yud. But really there's 5 letters, because there's also keter, there's also crown. So again, it's not that really there's another letter. We're just saying that to capture what's above the word, you have to have some kind of something hovering above it, and the thing that's hovering above it, that's the crown. So the same thing by the exiles. Because there's a crown in Tumah, in impurity, just as there is a crown in purity, in holiness. Yosef liket kol hakesef. And so what was Yosef working on? Yosef was working on the crown all the time. He was working on rectifying this impure husk of Egypt. That's what he wanted to do. I mean, why was Yosef there? You think about it. Yosef was in exile. All the other brothers weren't in exile. He was the first one to be in exile. And you see from him very clearly that the whole purpose of being in exile is to rectify the place that you're in. You're not just there because, of course, he was, you could say the same thing. I was hated by my brothers. I was sold into slavery. I was thrown into the pit. I was done this. And he could live his life as a betroden, or not live his life and not care whether he's alive or not. And live his life in a perpetual state of victimhood. But Yosef understood that if I was sent here, I wasn't sent here to be a victim. I don't know why God makes it that this is the state of affairs in which I came here. Right? An interesting thing was, Yosef was so smart. Why didn't they figure it out earlier? How was it that the Pharaoh didn't send an emissary to the land of Israel, saying, the land of Canaan back then, saying, Mr. Jacob, I hear you have a really, really smart son. I want him to be my viceroy. I'll take him down amid fanfare and everything, and we'll make him the viceroy because he's the only one that I see that can run this kingdom. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Right. The world has a way that things that are right don't happen just because they're right. You have to fight victimhood, and you have to make things right. That's what this world is about. That's what life in this world is about. You can't change it. Why did Hashem do it this way? Why did He make a world in which everything falls into place in the first place? So, those are all very important questions. When a person is faced with the reality, he has to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a victim, or am I going to change the situation? So Yosef came down to Egypt, and he said, if I'm down here in Egypt, this is the biggest empire in the world, the most important empire in the world, I'm here to change it. I'm here to rectify it. I'm here to bring it closer to God. That's why I'm here. So what did he do? He gathered all the gold, all the money. So now we see that everything in Egypt is built on 5. Okay? 1/5 came out. When he gives them presents, he gives them 5 dresses each. And to Binyamin he gave twice as much. So he gave, I guess, 10. What else there is in 5s? I don't remember. There's all kinds of 5s. But the main thing is that Yosef gathered all the money, and what did he do? He gave a 5th to Pharaoh, and 4/5 he left for them, for the treasury.
He took it for himself.
For the treasury. The 4 parts, they're the revealed. He didn't need to do anything with it. So he left it. And it was whatever, it needed to run the country. I don't need that. But what he took for himself, it's called, they took for Pharaoh, was 1/5, the top 5th. וחמישית הוא פרצוף כתר, שהוא עיקר היניקה שלהם מבחינת העורף, אחוריים לרצון העליון. And the 1/5, it represents the crown, because the crown, right, is 1/5 of crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and malchus, kingdom. So I'll say it in Hebrew, so there you go. Keter is 1/5 of Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Tiferet, Malchut. Right? So it's 1/5. So that indicates, as another indication, that Yosef's focus was on fixing the 1/5 that is the crown. Meaning he came there into this position of becoming the viceroy of Egypt in order to rectify the source of Egypt in the world. The source of what it represents. He was able, when he finished his work in Egypt and he brought his brothers down and his father down, he had clarified, he had rectified all 288 sparks of holiness, single-handedly. First of all, so here's this is a very important statement. Everybody thinks...
I thought it was the Jews.
What?
I thought it was the Jews.
Right? It's a very important statement what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. Something is well known in Kabbalah, but a lot of people think that it's not like that. They don't know it well enough. 288 sparks is not saying there's 288 sparks in the world. It's saying there's 288 sparks in everything that you're doing. Every person, whatever they're doing, there's 288 sparks. When we say that they came out of Egypt, they were able to rectify 202 and 86 were left over. What we mean to say is that they left by running away. And because the people left running away, they didn't leave in the normal state of affairs. So 86 sparks were still concealed. They didn't finish the job they were supposed to do. It doesn't mean that we're forever bound to these 86 sparks. Not at all. That was what they needed to do then. They didn't finish the whole job. But Yosef, what he was faced with, it's like saying, in everything that you do, there's 288 sparks. Everything that Yaakov does, everything that I do, everything that this shul needs to do, anything, wherever you look, 288 sparks is not saying there's some universal 288 sparks sitting somewhere, and the moment we get rid of that, we finish clarifying, we finish rectifying that, that's the end. No, everything, you need to make this thing, it has 288 sparks. It's a way of analyzing anything that needs rectification. That's what it really means. So it's very important to know that about Kabbalah, because a lot of people take this thing the wrong way. They don't understand what it means. So when the Rebbe was talking about, we finished Avodat HaBerurim, we finished clarifying 288 sparks. So saying, what we had to do, we finished to do. It doesn't mean that 30 years later there's not another 288 sparks. Of course there are. It could be that the Rebbe wasn't exactly right, and then there were 2 sparks left over. It doesn't matter. It's immaterial. In the end, anything that you're coming to rectify can be analyzed using this number 288, and you have to understand why. It's the double square of 12. There's a lot of stuff about this number, not for now. And he was able to rectify the 288 sparks that he was faced with completely by taking the life force, meaning the money behind everything the Egyptians owned. He took it not to take it from them, he took it to change it. This is like the famous story that I once told you about Rav Motke of Chernobyl, that he had this chassid who was very, very stringy, and he never wanted to give anything to anyone. So finally the Rebbe came, every Hanukkah he would go light candles somewhere else, and then he came to his village. Remember that story? And he forced him, and basically he took all his money, and then he gave it back to him. He said, why did I need to take it from you? Because I saw that you had made it in impure means. You weren't completely honest in your dealings. So I took it. I take things the right way. And then I give it back to you. It's cleansed now. It's now you have your money again, and you won't do this again from now. And Yosef's work in Egypt was what made possible the revelation of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And it made possible everything that Moses did. His cunningness, his connivingness was that he was able to convince the Egyptians that from their own goodwill they're going to sell everything to him. Now why is it cunning? Because how long was the famine in the end?
Another few weeks.
Yeah, they didn't know. It was 2 years altogether. The dream said 7 years, and so that's his cunningness. It doesn't mean that that's really what he saw. It could be that Yosef understood something else entirely.
Because Jacob came, so therefore.
That's the teretz. the meteorological explanation is that Jacob came, and then the water started rising again. Who knows? We don't know. But the bottom line is he tricked them. But he tricked them in order to save them from themselves, as it were. Okay. As far as everybody was concerned, there was a famine. There's going to be a famine for another 5 years. So there's no other way to... It's not completely like that. Because in the end, they had to eat. So they could have asked the question, how is it that in the second year, he's already taken everything we own? What's going to happen in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh year? What's he going to take then? He wasn't interested in it. He would have given it for free. If you don't want to say that the famine would have stopped, and he knew the famine would have stopped, you would say that he knew that after they gave him everything, why wait long? Let's do it in 2 years. The third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh year, I'll give everything for free. They don't need to give me anything. Why? Because my whole purpose was to elevate them. My whole purpose was to get them to become servants of Pharaoh, as it were, and to elevate all of Egypt. And they said, you give us life from now on. Because he was the one who was giving food to all of Egypt. And all he did was he took the 1/5 in order to rectify the crown. To rectify, and everything that he did was for that purpose. And all he did was treat them with loving kindness. And that's how he took the good from them. That's how he didn't take the good, that's how he made them good. He made them into something good. And gives an example. In the same way that if a child is holding on to something, and it's not good for him to hold on to it. For instance, holding on to, matches. And he's a little kid, he doesn't understand what he's doing. So you fool him into giving you the box of matches. He doesn't even know, you can imagine that he's not holding the box of matches. He's got his key on the ignition, and he turned the car on, and he's about to drive off, and he's 5 years old. So you trick him into turning the car off, or something like that. You're doing it for his own good. So people don't like it. Well, why are you mitnaseh? They say mitnaseh. Why are you
Fooling me.
No, why are you mitnaseh? You're patronizing. Why are you patronizing? What can you do? You're a little child. You don't understand what you're doing. If it's a little child that you don't patronize, it's just taking care of them. So spiritually, anyway. שייתן בגדול רצונתו ודי למי. מה שהיה עניין המלחמה במכות דם צפרדע שעשה משה לא היה מועיל, כי אם כשעשה יוסף הכנה מתחילה לברר מהם בדרך טוב וחסד שאמרו החייתנו, ואחר כך היה ונקה למשה ללחום ממהם ולברר מהם בעל כורחם ודי למבין. Amazing thing he says here. If Yosef would not have rectified Egypt with loving kindness before, then the whole way of might that Moses used, which is the 10 plagues, would not have worked. It's an amazing statement. Because you would wonder the other way around. If Yosef already rectified them with loving kindness, why did Moses need to use force? Apparently, what he's saying here is that it needs both sides. Mm-hmm. To really rectify something, you both have to come to it with kindness, and you also have to fight against its evil part. It's not enough to elevate the good. You have to also fight against the evil. But if he would not have elevated the good in Egypt, if Yosef would not have elevated the good in Egypt before, then what Moses did to the evil in Egypt would not have helped, because all it would have done is it would have subdued the evil, but they wouldn't have been able to really be rectified. וזהו כי נחש ינחש. פירוש שבירר בחינת נחש כתר דקליפה על ידי שהיה הגבוה מאוד נעלה מבחינת אור שתאיר חוכמה סתימה, ואין דבר נעלם ממנו, כי שווים כמה הנעלם עם הגילוי, כמו שכתוב, ונסתרו ונגלות, אתה יודע, בחינת גילוי קנה. And that's what it means that Yosef was able to come up higher than the cunningness of the serpent, which only sees the concealed wisdom that we talked about yesterday. Because above the concealed wisdom, everything is equal. What's revealed and what's concealed is all the same. That's why it says that he gathered all the silver. Silver is always loving kindness. Gold is always might. And silver is always chesed. And gold is always gvura. So he brought together, this is the sign that he did everything with loving kindness, because he gathered all the silver, meaning he gathered all the money, which is loving kindness. Brought it all the way up to the source of all the loving kindness in the world, which is what? שהוא גביע הכסף שבו ינחש ויודע עתידות כולו ודי למבין. ואומנם בימי שלמה נאמר אין כסף נחשב לאומה. An amazing thing. In Shlomo's time, Solomon is considered a reincarnation of the Yosef, because he's the wisest of all men, like Yosef. And there it says that money or silver had no value. At that time, the crown was completely rectified. And the sign that they were working on the crown again was that in Solomon's time, the silver was worthless, and the the gold was valuable. And that's why there's verses in the Book of Kings that describe that Solomon sent ships to Ophir. All kinds of ideas about where this Ophir is, but apparently somewhere in Africa, to bring back, you also hear in Syria, you hear Africa, right? You hear the Africa, to bring gold. What's the whole purpose of this? To really understand this mimer in the end, so we finish this mimer, you have to read the next one. Lehavin ma'amar hazeh b'inyan hasfichim. And just in 2 words, in 1 minute. What he's saying here is that in the time of exile, things grow by themselves. Right? Because what's the time of exile? Like it's like the 7th year, like we are now in Shemitah. In the Shemitah, it's not that nothing grows. It just grows by itself without you doing anything. That's how exile is considered. Exile is like linked directly to Shemitah. Because it says, that because you didn't keep Shemitah, then the exile comes to the world. Meaning that the Shemitah is instead of exile. So they're the same thing. The idea behind both of them is that things happen by themselves. They don't happen because of you. You don't orchestrate anything. The ground grows by itself. So what he's saying here is that Binyamin represents people that grow by themselves. The Beinoni of the Tanya, the regular person, is someone who became a Jew, again, in his thought, in his conduct, without working on it. That's what a Beinoni really means. It's like a safiach. It's like this growth from the ground that just happens by itself. All the spiritual stature that you and I have, it sort of happened by itself. We didn't invest time in it. And then the question becomes, what do you do with this with these sfichim? Are they? First of all, there's a question: do they have Kedushat Shvit? Do they have the holiness of? So we question that they do. Do you need to give a tenth from them? You don't need to give a tenth from them. There's also a question about that. But he's saying Binyamin is what grew by itself after Yaakov was no longer with Rachel. To understand that fully, we have to read the next mimer. It's a very interesting mimer in and of itself. We're not going to because it's long gone. We're going to have to learn Shmos. But this topic is really developed further in the next mimer. We'll move it.